Hey everyone, and welcome to Season 2 of Writing Our Way Out, the podcast. My name is Dave Coogan, and this show is based on the book, Writing Our Way Out, Memoirs from Jail, the creative culmination of a writing class that I started at the Richmond City Jail and that grew into a journey of re-entry with 10 men. In the book and on this show, we explore all of the conditions, traps, and turning points on the path to prison in America and the way to be free. This is Writing Our Way Out, the podcast, Season 2, Episode 4. Don't shoot. When Mohammad Taib faced a man with a gun in his convenience store, he pleaded with him, "Don't shoot," but got shot. He survived. Years later, he was shot again and died, leaving his wife and sons in pain and his daughter Zain searching for healing. But how? How do the victims of crime move beyond the tragedy that upends their lives into a narrative that they can control? With us tonight on the show is Zain Taib. She is the daughter of Mohammad Taib, a graduate of Virginia Commonwealth University, a former Peace Corps volunteer, and a budget analyst at the U.S. Department of Treasury. Hello, Zain.
Hello, David. Thank you. David, whichever works.
I take Dave if you take Zain.
Thanks for having me.
Well, welcome to the show. Also with us tonight is Ronald Fountain, co-author of Writing Our Way Out. Ronald is a peer recovery specialist, a person in recovery, and also a survivor of violent crime. Hey, Ron.
Hey, Dave. How you doing?
Everything's
hey, Zain. I'm doing great. Don't take it any type way. He won't even let us call him doctor. He's like, it's just Dave.
You spend all that time studying. You don't even let people call you doctor.
Oh, wow.
Hey.
Thanks for having me.
I appreciate that. Well, welcome back to the show, Ronald. So tonight we're going to try to probe to the bottom of this mystery of how people heal who have been the victim of violent crime. And we're going to look to see if there's a parallel to that process of healing for people in prison. So Zain, I want to start with you, and I want to see if we can get some more about this story. Tell me, who was Mohammad Taib? How did he see his life in America, and what was your life like with him?
You know, like any family in America or anywhere else, he was the caregiver, and you know, he was that person who was always there, very consistent, and he was always encouraging us and pushing us to, you know, get educated. And I think for him as an immigrant, you know, he felt like he was taking it, I want to call it sort of like a necessary evil. You know, he was in Pakistan, and he grew up there. He went to law school there. He went through a lot. He lost his father as well, and he came to the U.S. eventually over time, wanting to sort of settle down and start a family. And like many people that come here, immigrants, you know, but with very little in his pocket, he managed to start a whole life for himself. And for him, I think he looked at his life as sort of providing for his family. And I'm sure a lot of children of immigrants, they'll tell you, you know, their parents came here to give them a better life. And that's essentially what he did. I mean, was he perfect? No. Did he make mistakes? Of course, because he's human. And I think when you grow up, you start to realize that your parents are human, which you normally don't when you're a teenager or a kid, you know? And so for me, he was, and he still is, sort of like an inspiration to come here and to have nothing and then to build something, not just for himself, but also for a family. I think that's pretty big and it's a goal for a lot of people in this world. So that's just a little bit of who he was.
Absolutely. Ronald, tell me more about how does that, you know, you didn't know as much about your family when you were growing up, your mother and your father, but you did discover it as you went along. And so, like Zain, you had sort of a complicated relationship to that. Can you share more?
As Zain was speaking, you struck some chords because I long for that relationship with my father. Not knowing if he was my father because he wasn't on my birth certificate. But growing up, I got introduced to him. I have 2 siblings, and we got to have relationships. And I can remember being envious of them because I thought they was getting more than me. But what I found out in the long run was they got a very strict discipline that was abusive from him because he was in active addiction. We also a lot of times could relate that he stayed locked up. So it was like we would know him, we would have some time. I may get to see him a few while he's out, and the next thing I know, they're talking about he's gone again or he's away. So it was a lot of loss and abandonment when it came to where's my male figure? Why don't you want me? Lastly but not least, remember going to therapy as a child and having him and my mother show up at therapy. And they said they couldn't be together. It registered to me as a very hard hit. And what I heard, even though they were saying they didn't want to be together, was they didn't want me. And I wrestled with that and became very angry growing up.
Yeah. Zain, when you had the same kind of tension in there that you said he was a flawed person, and I guess like any kid in a family, there's always you have to work out that relationship, but you didn't have all the chances to do that. I know that there was an interruption there the first time that he was shot, and that disrupted everything in the family. Could you describe for us what that was like, what happened, and how it impacted everybody?
So the first time he was shot, like I think any victim of a crime, they'll tell you like they didn't know that was going to happen that day. They went out of their house, they left their homes thinking they were going to come back. And that's the same thing. It was just a normal day. We were all sitting around. I think it must have been Ramadan, when we were fasting. And my mom was just putting on some makeup, just, hanging out. We were all just chilling. And then next thing you know, my mom gets this call and she rushes out. We don't know what anything's happening. And me and my brother are just sitting there in ignorant bliss until my two little brothers, who must have been, I don't know, 3 or 4 at that time. They occasionally go to the store because it's sort of like a family place. We show up, we hang out with dad, we hang out with mom, we get free candy sometimes. It was a place that we went to see our parents. And the robber or whoever, they came in, and my brothers were there, and he, my dad, I guess he sort of just went into his normal, like this mode he gets into, I guess, where he grabbed the gun out of the hand and started, wrestling with the person who came in, the robber, and shot his foot. And the only thing I remember really a lot of times is just seeing my little brothers coming in and just crying and stop, dad got shot, and we just waited around. And again, I'm sure Ron will also say, you don't expect these things, and it never occurs to you because you're just living in this sort of bliss that people are nice to each other or something. I don't know. And this world, your world is sort of shattered as a kid, and you're like, wow, dad's hurt. Dad might not make it. And then he did. And I remember, just the response from the community. time was, oh my God, look at your dad. You know, he got shot, and then 2 weeks later, he's back at the store working. That's amazing, and all this other stuff. And there was sort of like, I mean, I guess I didn't see it at the time. There was a respect for a man who, even though he got shot, he went back to work because that was the only way his family was going to survive. And so again, flawed man, as we all are, I'm flawed too. You know, we don't always do the best things. But at the end of the day, he was consistent. He was there, you know, it's my dad.
Yeah. Yeah. Ronald, I know you're familiar with the South Side of Richmond. Tell me a little bit more about the South Side of Richmond and where, Zain, what's the name of the store and where it is, so Ronald knows a little bit more.
Sure. So it's out in South Side on Midlothian off of Eric Road. There's this housing complex nearby. It used to be called Baywood Park when I was little. Somebody came in, bought it. I think it's called Aiden Park now. You know, it's been there forever, like 20 some odd years now. I don't know if you know the place, but.
As you said, the street, it didn't ring a familiar bell, but what I was able to do, if y'all are familiar with George Wolf High School.
Yeah.
In the housing project that's set across from it. I took the picture of that and imagined the store there. My condolences with your loss that you suffered with that one, to violence, first off. As you said there and you spoke, I thought about once I was released and I decided that this change was going to stick and I was going to be a productive citizen at all costs. I made a decision in 2009 to come back to my home, which is Baltimore, Maryland. And I came back in April with my final trip, the last of my belongings, and my birthday is June 22nd. I got a job at a hotel, and on my way from work, I was robbed at gunpoint. It was a moment that, like, my life froze. I knew that I wanted to live, but then I was in a surreal place of, is this really happening? And the bad part of I'll say the bad part of it at the time was I was able to make it to my my brother's house with his fiance at the time and their 2 kids, and then say, what do I do now? Because this person lives in the same complex. Do I call the police and there's a possibility that something's going to happen? So I called a friend and they came and we drove up into where I had seen him go, and I seen the house. Like, he was still out, and I seen the house that he went into. And I made a decision to call the police, and it was the scariest feeling because the police, when they ran my name, they looked at me as a perpetrator. Somehow I had aggravated this assault against me. And then they kept asking me the question, are you sure that that's the house? Are you sure? Are you sure? I was so nervous when they finally kicked the house in because they wouldn't answer the door that it was like a sigh of relief when they brought them out. Like, okay, this chapter is closed. And I can remember going to court. But I'm going to stop there because I believe I don't want to run into your segment.
No, absolutely not. I think that kind of brings up sort of a good point about the area that, you know, my family's store is currently in. If you go down that street, and you probably will, I'm sure many times, there's what else is there besides, you know, sort of like payday loans. There's probably 2 strip clubs on that block right there. You know, they opened up a casino there as well. And, you know, there's neighborhoods and people and kids and elementary schools and high schools in that place. And for a really long time, it was sort of like that place where violence happened all the time. You know, every time, especially also near those housing complexes as well. And I always thought to myself, is all these things happening all in this one area? Is it a coincidence? Did all of the whole Richmond's bad people show up to this one place? Or what is it that makes people commit crime? What is it that makes something unsafe? And that's just another reminder again that crime isn't sort of this black and white thing where it's like good person, bad person, crime happened. It's complex. There's never one good answer to why someone committed certain crimes or why someone did anything. And I think, you just look around you and you wonder, well, if I was in this situation, would I be any different? I have some privilege. My father owned a business. He was able to provide for my family. And that's not the same to say for a lot of people that I grew up with or a lot of people that were in that same, place, that, same school or same neighborhood. And it's just, again, for me, just my whole experience from growing up in that little slot of Midlothian, from, dealing with violence and robbery, which has, I've been in a robbery as well in my family store. It's a very common thing for a lot of convenience store owners or to experience. And it just, sometimes you sit there and it's like, when is this going to stop? When are we going to feel safe again? Or have we ever felt safe or anything like that? And I just think that, that's a perfect just sort of culmination of what it's like to be sort of in this constant circle of crime where, again, we make it into black and white. We make one person hurt this person or hurt that person, and that's it. But in reality, we have to be looking at an extremely complex issue, and there's no one answer for it. It's a long rant. I hope you found something good in there.
No, not a rant, Actually, really reflective, good. Because what you're getting at is the complexity of the stories behind why people do what they do. I mean, you started off with your father's story. He came here, he settled, he decided he wanted to provide for his family and make a living, and he did that. Ronald got out of prison, resolving he's going to do something different with his life. He made a decision, and now he's put back into the system. Or put back into the situation, but from the other side of it as a victim. And, what happens is that, you make a decision about your story, but when crime occurs, it takes you out of your story. So your father, his narrative was completely interrupted that first time when he was shot. And I know that, you shared with me that it affected him. It affected his sleep. It affected his moods. It affected his sense of safety. It affected how the family stayed in equilibrium with one another. And Ronald shared the same thing. He said his whole fight or flight kicked in. Everything froze. He didn't know, can I call the police? Because if I call the police, now I'm putting myself back into the police narrative of who I am. So there's a lot of tension in here around how we control the story of what happened. What really surprised me about your story, the more I learned about it, is how you dealt with the tragedy, because there's so much in it we need to get to. And I want to take us back to your reaction the second time he was shot, when he actually died this time. Mm-hmm. You were in Mexico. Mm-hmm. You were a senior at VCU, right?
Yeah. Great way to start off your senior year. I guess I'm sorry for the really dark humor, but I was in Mexico, and just one day there's a phone call and keeps ringing. I'm asleep. I don't want to pick it up. Finally, I picked that phone call up. And my mom can't speak really because it's just happened and she's got to tell me. And so One of my dad's friends who, he always loved to come and visit my dad and like drink tea and, just chat about politics and things like that. He had came and saw everything that happened. And so he was the one who ended up telling me, he was like, Zain, your father has been shot, come home. They didn't want to tell me that my father had passed away, at the scene, because they didn't want me to be on that really long, unforgiving plane ride. But unfortunately, we sort of live in this world where people are so quick to go on social media and post things. And unfortunately, I found out that my father had passed away with everybody posting on their little statuses that, he had died. And I just sobbed and sobbed and sobbed uncontrollably until, there's a woman who was really kind enough to like hold me and try to comfort me in a little bit. And then, you get home and you go through, just thinking about the funeral. I think I can't remember if I've been to another funeral since then. But it was a jarring experience, obviously. You're like, wait, is this really happening? Am I really, feeling this? Is this, what I'm really having to go through? And I don't really know how else to explain it. It just sort of takes you out of time and space and puts you in a different world.
Yeah. Ronald, when was
Yes.
when was the first time you had that experience of losing somebody you loved?
I can remember I was somewhere near the age of 5 years old. My biological mother drank heavy, but I did get to learn and meet with her and know that she was my mom. But she lived with a distant family relative. Well, distant friends of the family, where they all lived together and we was like a family. And it was a man who I took him as like my grandfather. And he took me around Baltimore everywhere he went. He drank, but he would always make sure I knew the route. Like it was my training ground. He'd be like, I need you to remember this is stop that we get on. And I need you to remember this where we get off. I apologize ahead of time because I don't talk about it much. I can remember coming home and I was going to run down into the basement where he'd be. And they told me I couldn't go. And I was like, why? I want to see my granddad. I want to see my granddad. And nobody would tell me why. And all I remember after that is the funeral. And then I was denied the chance to go to the funeral. So that day, coming home and wanting to be there, that was my first big taste of like loss. But I didn't know, and at that time I felt like it was abandonment because of the decisions they made. And I became less trusted of people saying they love me, they care about me. It wouldn't be until I was much, much older that I could go this far in telling the story because I still miss them.
Absolutely. That's very real. I think so. When my father's funeral happened, actually, typically, so my family's very Pakistani Pashtun. And so they have very strict sort of customs that they follow. And one of their customs is to not allow women to go to the burial site. It is what it is. So, it was just fighting tooth and nail just to even be there when my father was buried. Like, I don't know what it is about death to make everybody just, so much drama, but that's what happened. At the funeral, the imam or the religious leader that we have as a Muslim, he told me something that I still carry every day with me. He said, if God could take away your pain, he would. But, he doesn't want to see you in pain, but this is sort of a necessary part of life to lose, to feel grief. And I'm sure you can also run, correct me if I'm wrong, but you never really get over that loss. That person is always just not going to be there. But you learn to bear that pain a lot better. And you learn, hopefully, you learn something out of it. And hopefully that makes your life better. And so far, not so bad. Good things have happened. It's just, I think, this process has made me really come to sort of terms that suffering is sort of a part of life, and it molds us into better people, we hope. And maybe that's the reason why we go through so much pain and so much loss, because we do have to lose so much people, so many people over time, not just your grandfather, your mother, your father, hopefully your children outlive you, things like that. It's just a part of life that we have to learn to move on with, even though they're not there, we still have to keep going.
I think that was a wise thing that Iman told you about grief, because how will you know joy without knowing grief? And I understand too that you had a unique way of learning that after he told you that. Can you share what you did when you went to the Peace Corps? And I know you went to Rwanda.
Yeah.
And I know you learned a lot about grief and loss in Rwanda.
Oh, did I ever learn? I think every day I'm so grateful that that Peace Corps sent me to Rwanda. I don't know what it was after my father passed. I grew up sort of listening to these stories of him traveling all over the world and getting into trouble. He once told me that he got robbed at gunpoint in Nairobi. He said one time he was in Moscow and, he just had to stay on the ship the whole time because he didn't have a visa or something like that. And so I just grew up on those stories. And I guess when I got my chance, and even though it wasn't the most perfect time after just losing your father, I just had to take that chance. And I'm so glad I did, because Rwanda was definitely the place where I learned to exist without overwhelming pain, if that makes sense. I know that sounds, maybe that sounds a little melodramatic, but there's something about a little history about the Rwandan genocide. Not too long ago, maybe 20 some odd years ago, the Hutus, rebel Hutus started killing Tutsis, Rwandan Tutsis. And it's absolutely horrific. If you go there, it's very apparent in everybody's life that, the genocide against the Tutsis, it's still real for people. And you go there and it's just like almost, you'll go to a site, maybe a church, and they'll tell you, and that church, during the genocide, they put a bunch of Tutsis like seeking refuge in a church, and these priests and these nuns, they let the rebel Hutus come, they locked the doors, and they just let them burn. And you just hear the horrific amount of crime committed against humanity by people. And you think, what makes this person so different from us that they would commit these things? And I think it was in Rwanda where I really started to sort of grasp the idea that, we all have this capacity for good and bad. And really, there's nothing that separates us too much except the options and choices we were given.
Oh, tell me about the choice that I know you told me about the wedding. That's something
sure,
that
absolutely.
Yeah, that really fits in here, I think.
Yeah, and I think the thing is you hear, it's not just one story like that. There are so many stories where in Rwanda, people are so open with their pain. They'll tell it at happy events, obviously, when they're remembering the genocide, or, they're very open about this stuff. And I was at a wedding, must have been my first month in Rwanda. And at the wedding, the bride, she got up and talk, which is not normal. Brides don't normally speak at weddings, but she with her whole family, her whole brothers, they all came together, and they were like, she picked this particular day because that was the day that they were almost killed by Hutu rebels, and the rebels had came in through their homes and forced them all on the ground, basically with their hands on the ground, their heads on the ground. And, they thought they were going to die that day. And there's stories like that, just every person you meet, where they had experienced some of the worst, absolute worst of humanity, and they survived. And here they are, rebuilding their homes, rebuilding their country with the same people. Obviously they had their sort of justice system go in, and a lot of genocidaires which is, I guess, a French term for genociders, or I don't know if there's a word in it in English. They had their process and everything like that, and people who committed genocide crimes are in jail, and some are still free. It's just realizing that they came home to the very people, and they came home and they were living next to the very people that had turned them into the Hutus, because that's what was happening in Rwanda. Neighbors were turning in neighbors, people that you thought were your friends, and one particular woman that I feel like I learned so much from. Her name is Gloriose, and she was a Peace Corps sort of cultural. She sort of helped us in our sites, make sure that our sites were good for us to have Peace Corps volunteers. We were safe, and she was a really wonderful person, and also really very vocal about her experience. And one of the experiences that she's told me that still sticks with me, and she's talking about how her parents were taken, and there were Hutu rebels coming in, ransacking her house. She could hear, I can't remember if it was a relative or whoever being raped outside. It's just, I knew you're hearing this, you're listening to this, and she says, people ask me, have I forgiven my killer, my parents' killer? And she said something to me. She said, how can I forgive someone I don't know? And I thought that was like the most mind-blowing thing for me, because at that time I was really, really just constantly struggling with this. I don't know who killed my dad. I don't know what his last moments were. Should I care? Should I be looking? Should I do something? And there she was saying, I can't forgive the person I know. And I thought that was the most liberating thing, because I think you're constantly worried about healing, and forgiveness is a part of healing as well. And you just feel like you're going to carry this for your whole life. And then there's just something you realize you don't have to give this person your forgiveness. You can be kind to yourself and move on and do better. If I knew who my father's killer was, I could forgive that person if I knew the situation, if I knew what was happening, but I don't. But what I know is that it wasn't just, 2 bullets that killed him. It was a whole system that just is in chaos. And, there are people who are getting caught up in this really unjust system that's been going on for centuries in this country. As Ron was talking about, coming out and trying to be straight and try to just take care of yourself. Sometimes that's hard when doors are constant closing in your face and no one seems to trust you, and all these things. I know people want me to believe that I need to be angry at my father's killer. Like, I need to hate this person and you don't want them to be dead or all this other stuff. But I think you just have to go like, what's good for me? And then what's going to make my pain go away? And so that's sort of my journey with healing and how I kind of came to that in Rwanda, because people were healing, they were putting in the work, they were trying to make their country better, trying to make their lives better. And that does wonders for the healing process.
I wanted to ask you, Ronald, about that. She kind of anticipated what I was going to get to at the end. It's the question about justice, because you were able to look at the person who robbed you. You were in court and you were about to testify. I would like you to walk us through that moment of what you were feeling when you got to do what Zain was not able to do, which is face the person who hurt you. I understand it's a different kind of case, you know, but I'm still, the process is similar to me. Can you share with us how you got over that moment?
Yes. I had to get some background to it. Thank you, Zain, for your openness and your sharing. I've sat on both sides of the fence. So one of the things for me when I began my journey to my healing was I work a concept that says I have to feel it, I have to deal with it, and then I can heal from it. But being a person of long-term recovery, the statement that is often given or that we heard in the 12-step program was hurt people, hurt people. I tagline this mantra that I say, and that is, I am an ex-offender, but I am not a criminal. Mm-hmm. Even though the system convicted me or put me in spaces where I pled guilty, all the time, I can't say that I got up and maliciously intended to do harm to someone else. I was just trying to survive another day.
Absolutely.
So when I went to court for the first robbery, I was then robbed again a year later and stabbed in that robbery where I didn't get to face the person. So I'm going to tie the both of them into what Dave has asked me. In the first one, I wrestled because I apologize for your loss, Zain. But the many times through my incarceration, nobody knew the loss that I felt with the injustice that I would get with being a part of the system. Once you go in there, it will breed the worst of you out. And once you're released, if you don't have the support system to regain that part of you that says, it's okay, you can make it past this, that's where recidivism comes in. And you get out here and you can no longer function in the goodness of society. All you think about is, how can I get over it? What is the next big thing I'm going to do? And if you're forced in that place where you carry a weapon or something violent and you think that your life may be in jeopardy, you'll act to save your life. Mm-hmm. So now I'm in this predicament where I'm holding these guys' life in my hand. And I want to believe in my heart that that night, because he didn't shoot me, because he didn't get anything out of it, he was put up to do it. It wasn't his wish and his desire to cause me any harm. But it was like, now I hold that power. And I can remember sitting and waiting for them to call me. And all I could do was pray to this power that I believe created me and created this world, that, like, if there be any other way, don't let me have to do this. And I don't know, but in feeling it and doing that cry out and actually sitting there, I got in touch with me, but it was something about when they came to me and they said, the guys have pled guilty, you don't have to come in the room. That forgiveness piece that you was talking about, I was able to do it so softly. Like, it was like a part of redemption, that they want to right a wrong, a past wrong that they've committed, and they don't need me to stamp that they did it. It was like they took ownership. And that brought a sense of peace to me that I was able to go on. But then, as being the victim of a crime that I found out the gun was actively loaded, and if he had pulled the trigger, it could have been the end of my life. I became real active with wanting to see justice and society meet on the same page. Because like I just said, because I've been a part of the system, no matter what happens to me, the system doesn't look at me as a victim, they look at me as the predator.
Absolutely.
And the agitator. And I know that is something that's wrong and broken within the system that drives me, that every day I think about the many incarcerations I did of those that I left behind. So I take this moment to try and offer some level of passage for you to say, I am a representation and asking your forgiveness for the harm that was caused to you by one of my fellow brothers, in an act that you may never get to know why they did it. They took something precious away from you. But I apologize that you had to go through that. And I pray that your journey continues to add a lot of healing and peace to you, and that you show others how to heal from their pain and you to propel them to their greatness.
I really appreciate that, because I think it just points out this wonderful, wonderful thing is that, again, everybody has this capacity for good and evil, or good and bad. And I don't think people are inherently bad or inherently good, or for whatever reason that someone is going to go towards badness. I think people just are surviving, and they're just surviving with whatever options are in front of them. And when you have a society where young men, especially young Black men, have only very few options, and most of them are, going towards crime, or there's a failure. That's a failure in society. That's a failure of government. And this idea that we need to just punish people who commit crime, and it just takes away the humanity of it all, because maybe that is what's happening right now. Someone's trying to survive. For whatever reason, in their mind, they believe this is what's going to make them survive.
Well,
Go ahead, sorry.
What I hear from both of you is so much grace. It's amazing what grace
There's a lot of snot coming out of my nose.
Well, that too, I suppose. Yeah, that comes with the grace. It's like grace. The tears too, because you got me crying. I was just thinking about that. I am so impressed with both of you to bring so much grace to this discussion. Ronald, so much heart in you to shoulder that apology. Zain, you approached me when you learned about the show, and your first comment to me was not, I have a story, but how can I contribute to help? I want to point that out. I mean, that's just amazing that both of you arrived at this perspective in life where you're seeing beyond your own pain, and not only how to solve the problems that you face, but how others can as well. And I wanted to end there. I want to give you both one final word of wisdom or insight or reflection on it. But mine is grace. Mine is just that the two of you exhibiting amazing grace in this. Ronald, let me start with you. What's your final closing thought?
Sure. Zain, thank you for sharing the history of Rwanda. It's a place that is right near and dear to my heart that I would like to go. And that'll resound my closing thought. Be careful.
I know a few people, if you are ever looking to go, who would love to have you visit. So let me know.
Sure. We definitely will connect.
Yeah.
So that I can make that journey. So it's often told to me, people that judge don't matter. And those that judge, people that judge don't matter. And those that matter don't judge. I took it a step further to say, just because someone doesn't matter in this moment, it doesn't mean they won't matter in this lifetime. I am African American. The reality that you heard about and experienced in Rwanda, here in America, I live it every day. It's my reality. I'm afraid that the police may kill me, and I live in that fear. And then I live in the fear that my fellow man, who is the same complexion of me, out of need and necessity, may take my life. I urge myself each day to get up, to live on purpose and with intention, that I'm going to change a culture. I'm going to find my tribe and impact as many lives as I can to make a difference. And this will be the only chance that you get. Live it well and be well to others and be kind to others. That is my final thought as I go to try and, I don't know, regain humanity. I identify like this when you ask me anything about race. If I'm forced into a corner where I must say something about race, it's this simple for me. I am human. And if you want to know my background, it's of African descent.
Yes. Yes.
But I no longer subscribe to the race question.
Yes. Beautiful. Zain, your final thoughts.
I think the hardest part, and I'm sure that people who go through incarceration or anybody who goes through violent crime or experiences that there's just a lot of anger, in you. And in me as well, when my father passed away, I was really angry. And to be honest, sometimes I wake up angry, but that's just sort of life. And I think what my anger has done is it's opened my eyes, along with many other experiences that I've had, in that we don't have to accept this to be the way of life. What we live is just this circle of crime that hurts another person and hurts another person, and then hurt people. And in reality, I think that there are a lot of things that we can do to improve each other's lives, and it makes our lives better as well. And that's just been sort of my passion for a long time, is to through Peace Corps, and hopefully maybe one day I make a difference in the federal government. Fingers crossed. I'm here for the working man. I'm here for the people of the United States. And every day I love my job, and every day I'm so grateful to be where I am. And so through this sort of horrible tragedy, I've gained sort of the sixth eye, or it's called the third eye, right? This sort of like third eye, that we don't have to accept the way things are right now. We don't have to accept that what we should be doing to people is constantly locking them up, taking away 10 years, 15 years of their lives. This is not the way that we need to live, and we don't have to accept it. And that's what I've sort of come to, is that there's a path forward, and I will try every single day to keep working towards that path. Fingers crossed, this is not the last time you will hear from me. So
we hope not, and we certainly thank you for reaching out so we can hear your story on Writing Our Way Out, the podcast. That's all the time we have for today. I want to thank our guests, Zain Taib and Ronald Fountain. Thank you both so much.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you both for your testimony. If you want to learn more about this show or hear previous episodes, please go to writingourwayout.com. You can go there, listen to the show on that website. You can go to YouTube, Spotify, or Apple Podcasts, where you may subscribe and leave a review. We would love to hear from you. You can email me directly from the show's website, or you can follow the show on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. Reach out, let us know what you're thinking.
And he will reply, by the way, he will reply.
For sure. It's guaranteed. And quickly.
Yeah.
The theme music for this show was written and produced by Chris Coogan. You can learn more about him at cooganmusic.com. The show is produced by Rob Crocker, a PhD student in Media, Art, and Text at Virginia Commonwealth University. Hey, we appreciate you listening, and we look forward to seeing you next time on Writing Our Way Out, the podcast.